Welcome to Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. Today we begin the tale of Sam and the Simorgh. Now, I shall tell an astonishing tale, taken from the stories of our ancestors as they told it. See what strange events fate unfold for Sam. Listen well, my son. Sam had no child, and his heart grieved at this. There was a beautiful woman living in his private quarters. Her cheeks were like rose petals, her hair like musk. Her face was as splendid as the sun, and Sam had hopes that she would bear him a child. And this happened. After some time she gave birth to a beautiful boy, whose radiance lit the world. But although his face was bright as the sun, his hair was completely white. Given how the child looked, Sam was not told of his birth for a week. All the women of his household wept over the boy, and no one dared to tell Sam that this beautiful woman had given birth to a son who was an old man. Then a courageous wet nurse, who had a lion's spirit, came bravely before Sam and said, "May Sam's days be prosperous, and the hearts of those who wish him ill be torn out. In your woman's quarters, a fine boy has been born from your beloved. His body is like pure silver, his face like paradise, and you will find no ugly spots on him. His one fault is that his hair is white. Such is your fate, my lord." Sam descended from his throne and went into the women's quarter. When he saw his son's white hair, he despaired of the world, and lifting his face to the heavens, he complained bitterly. "O God, who is above all failings and faults, whatever your command is good. If I have committed a grave sin, if I have followed the ways of Ahriman, I repent, and I pray that God will grant me forgiveness. My grieving soul writhes in shame, and hot blood toils in my heart. What shall I say about this ill-omened child when men ask about his black body and his hair as white as jasmine? Shall I say he's a demon's child? He's like a leopard whose skin is of two colors. No longer shall I call down blessings on Persia. I shall quit this land for shame." He gave orders that the child be taken far away to the place where the Simorgh has her home. They took the boy and laid him down in the mountains, and then returned to the court. The day ended, and the champion's innocent son had no knowledge of white or black. His father had cast all kindness from his heart, and acted evilly toward his unweaned child. When Simorgh's chicks grew hungry, she flew up from her nest. She saw an unweaned crying baby lying on the ground. His cradle was of thorns. His wet nurse was the earth. He was naked, and no milk touched his lips. The black earth surrounded him, and above his head the sun shone in the summits of the heavens. Would that his mother and father had been leopards. They at least would have shaded him from the sun. The Simorgh flew down from the clouds, stretched out her claws, and clutched him, lifting him from the hot stones on which he laid. She flew with him back to her nest and the Alboraz mountains, where she intended to take him to her chicks, thinking they could feed off him and pay no attention to his cries. But God had other plans, so that when the Simorgh and her chicks looked at the little child weeping bitter tears, something wonderful to relate happened. They took pity on him, staring in astonishment at his lovely face. She sought out the most delicate morsels of the chase for the boy, touching them to his lips, and in this way many days passed, and the child grew into a fine young man. Men with caverns passing through the mountains would catch sight of this noble youth, whose body was like a cypress tree, whose chest was like that of a mountain of silver, and whose waist was as slim as a reed. Rumors of him spread through the world. Neither good nor evil ever remained hidden, and news of this glorious youth reached Sam, the son of Nariman. One night, Sam was asleep, his heart wearied with the cares of the world. He dreamed of a man from India galloping toward him on an Arab horse, who brought him good news of that noble sapling, his son. When he woke, he summoned his priests and told them of the dream and of the rumors he had heard. "What do you say to this?" he asked. "What does your wisdom make of it?" Young and old, all those present said to Sam, "Lions and leopards in their stony lairs, the fish and the monsters of the sea, all love and nourish their children and give thanks to God for them. You have broken this bond of benevolence in casting out your innocent child. Turn to God and repent, since he is the guide to good and evil." When dark night came and Sam slept again, his heart was filled with turmoil. In this dream, he saw a banner fluttering on a mountain in India. Then a beautiful slave appeared, leading a mighty army. A priest was on his left, and a wise sage was on his right. One of these two men came forward and said coldly to Sam, "Presumptuous and immoral man, you have washed shame before God from your heart and eyes. What kind of hero are you, if a bird has nourished your son? If it is a fault to have white hair, look at yourself, whose beard is white and whose hair is like the leaves of the willow. You despised your son, but God has been his protector, loving him more than a wet nurse would, while you were devoid of affection for him." Sam cried out in his sleep like a lion caught in a trap. When he awoke, Sam called his counselors and the leaders of his army and set off for the mountain to reclaim what he had rejected. He saw a mountain whose peak reached to the Pleiades, and on it was a great nest woven from ebony and sandalwood. Sam stared at the granite slopes at the terrifying Simorgh, and at its fearsome nest, which was like a palace towering in the clouds, but not one built by man's hands or from clay and water. He bowed his face down to the dirt, praising God who had created this bird and this mountain whose slope reached to the stars, acknowledging him as just and as powerful. He looked for a way to climb the mountain, seeking out wild animal tracks, and said, "O you, who are higher than all high places, than thought itself and the sun and the moon, if this youth is indeed from my loins, and not the seed of some evil demon, help me to climb this mountain." The Simorgh said to Sam's son, "You have endured the hardship of growing up in the nest, and now your father, great Sam, who is a champion among heroes, has come to this mountain searching for his son. He honors and values you now. I must give you back and return you to him safe and sound." Listen to the youth's answer. "You have tired of my friendship, then? Your nest has been a noble home for me, and 2 of your feathers have been a glorious crown for me." The Simorgh replied, "When you see the throne and crown and the ceremonial of the Kyanid court, this nest will mean nothing to you. Go see what fate has in store for you. Take these feathers of mine with you, so that you will always live under my protection. Since I brought you up beneath my wings with my own children, if any trouble comes to you, if there is talk of good and ill, throw one of my feathers into the fire, and my glory will at once appear to you. I shall come to you in the guise of a black cloud and bring you safely here." Then she hardened her heart for their parting, and lifting him up, soaring into the clouds, and setting him down before his father. The youth's hair reached below his chest. His body was like a mammoth's, and his cheeks were as fresh as the spring. When his father saw him, he wept, bowing his head before the Simorgh and paying homage to her. He stared at the youth from head to foot, and saw that he was worthy of Kyanid crown and the throne. His chest and arms were like a lion's, his face like the sun. His heart was a champion's, and his arm was that of a swordsman. His eyebrows were pitch black, his lips like coral, and his cheeks the color of blood. Sam's heart felt the happiness of paradise, and he called down blessings on his son. He draped the boy's body in a champion's cloak, and they set off down the mountain. When they reached its base, Sam had horse and royal clothes brought for his son. The army ranged itself before Sam, their hearts filled with happiness, and they set off on a return journey. preceded by elephants bearing drummers. The air filled with dust as they traveled, and the blares of trumpets, the dins of drums, the clash of Indian cymbals, and the cavalry's cries accompanied them as they joyfully entered the city. The king heard that Sam had returned from the mountains in splendor. Manucher was pleased and thanked God for this good news. He sent Nozar, hurrying to Sam, to offer his congratulations and to tell Sam to come to the king so that he might see the face of this youth who had been brought up in a nest. Then he could return to Zavolestrum to serve the king there. Nozar reached Sam and saw the hero's son with him. Sam dismounted and the two embraced. He asked for news of the king and his warriors, and Nozar handed over his message. Sam kissed the ground and immediately set off for the court, as his king had commanded. Manucher came out with his entourage to greet him, and as soon as Sam saw Manucher's banner, he dismounted and went forward on foot. Manucher ordered him to mount his horse, and the two set off for the Persian court. Manucher sat in state on the throne, and placed the royal crown on his head, and on one side of him sat Karine, and the other Sam. Then the chamberlain ushered in Sam's son Zal, splendidly dressed, with a golden crown on his head, bearing a golden mace. The king stared in wonder at his fine stature and handsome face, which made delight all hearts. He said to Sam, "Look after him well. For my sake, never cross him. Rejoice in no one but him. He has the royal far, the strength of a lion, a wise heart, and a sage's manner." And then Sam told the king of how and why he had decided that his child should die. He told him of Simorgh and her nest, of his regret in his belated quest to find his son. Throughout the world men heard of Sam and Zal, and of this wondrous bird. The king gave orders that sages, astrologers, and priests should inquire into Zal's horoscope, to see what the stars decreed for him. The astrologers studied the stars and said, "May you live forever in prosperity. He will be a famous champion, proud and intelligent, and a fine horseman." The king rejoiced to hear these words, and Sam's heart, too, was freed from sorrow. Manucher gave Sam a robe of honor, which drew praise from everyone, as well as Arab horses with golden saddles, Indian swords and golden scabbards, brocades, silks, fine carpets, rubies and gold slaves from the west dressed in western brocade with jeweled designs on a gold ground, trays of emeralds, gold and silver goblets set with turquoise and filled with musk, camphor, and saffron, helmets, barding, spears, arrows, bows, maces, thrones worked in turquoise and ivory, ruby seal rings, and golden belts. And then he wrote and sealed a charter full of celestial praise for Sam, bestowing on him lordship over Kabul, Tanbar, Mai, and India, the Sea of China, as far as the Sea of Sind, as well as Zavolestrum, as far as Bost. When he had received this charter and these gifts, Sam called for his horse, rose, and said to the king, "Kind king, lord of justice and righteousness, in this world, from the realm of the fish to the sphere of the moon, no one like you has ever reigned. No one has had your generosity, justice, nobility, and wisdom. The world is at peace because of you. You treat its treasures with contempt, and may the world never come when only your name remains to us." He bowed and kissed the throne, and then had the drums strapped onto his elephants. All the town turned out to watch as he and Zal set off for Zavolestrum. As he approached, news of this investiture preceded him, and the inhabitants decorated Sistan as though it were a paradise. The ground was of musk, the bricks of gold, and as Sam passed, people tossed musk, saffron, and gold and silver coins over him. The world was filled with rejoicing, with both the nobles and the common people joining in. All the nobility came before Sam, saying, "May the young man's arrival here be auspicious." and then they called down blessings on Zal and showered him with gold coins. Then Sam took his ease with wine and music, bestowing robes of honor on the wise and the noble, and all his courtiers competed to be honored the most. Sam summoned the experienced men of the country to speak with him. "Noble and prudent advisers," he said, "the wise king's orders are that I lead an army to invade the Gorgasron and Mazandaran. However, my heart and soul, my son, will remain here, while my eyes weep bitter tears at our separation. In my youth and arrogance I acted unjustly. God gave me a son, and I abandoned him. In my ignorance I did not realize his worth. The great Simorgh took him. God assigned him to her care, and she brought him up until he was like a lofty cypress. I reviled him, she valued him. When the time has come for me to be pardoned, God returned him to me. Know that this youth is my refuge, and I leave him among you to remind you of me. Treat him well, advise him well, show him the path to a noble life." Then Sam turned to Zal and said, "Act justly and generously. This is the way to seek happiness. Know that Zalofstrim is your home, all this realm under you, your command. See that the land flourishes beneath your reign, and that you make your friends' hearts rejoice. The keys of the treasury are yours, and my heart will be glad or sorrowful according to how you prosper or fail." Young Zal said to Sam, "How can I live without you now? Now that we have been reconciled, how can you contemplate separation again? If ever a man was born in sin, I am that man, and it is the right that justice is denied me. I ate dirt and tasted blood once, held in the great bird's claws. Now I am far from my protector, and it is fate that protects me. Of the world's flowers, my share is only thorns, but one cannot fight against God's decrees." Sam said, "It is right to say what is in your heart like this. Say it. Say whatever you wish. But the astrologers have seen that a good star guides you, and they have said that here is your home, here is your army, and here is your crown. We cannot quarrel with the heavens, and it is here your love must flourish. Now gather a group of companions about you, horsemen and men, eager for knowledge. Learn from them, listen to them, gain all kinds of knowledge, and taste the pleasures they bring. Enjoy life and be generous. Seek knowledge and be just." He spoke, and the din of drums rang out, and the air turned pitch black. The ground was the color of ebony, and the ringing of the bells and the clash of the Indian cymbals was heard before the king's pavilion. Sam gathered his forces and set off for war. Zal accompanied him for 2 stages of the way, and then his father clasped him tightly in his arms and wept extravagantly. He commanded his son to return with happiness in his heart to the crown and throne. Zal took the journey home, pondering on how he could live so that he would leave a good name behind him. He took his place on the ivory throne and placed the glittering crown on his head, resplendent with armbands and ox-headed mace, a golden torque and golden belt. He was eager to learn and summoned knowledgeable men from every province, astrologers and priests, as well as warriors and horsemen, and discussed all manners of subjects with them. Day and night he was closeted with them, discussing both weighty and trivial matters. Zal grew to be so learned that he was like a shining star in all the world. No one had ever seen another man with his knowledge and understanding. And so the heavens turned, spreading a canopy of love over Sam and Zal. And here I end my tale for today, but I'll be back tomorrow with more, much more.